When using resources, many people often forget that finding a work is not the only step in the research process. Any source still needs to be evaluated for scholarship and usability. In this tutorial, we will look at some guidelines to evaluate most types of resources, whether print or electronic. Remember that these are guidelines and not steadfast rules. You may find a resource that is perfectly appropriate, even though it does not follow one or two of the criteria. First, you want to look at the credibility of a source. This means identifying the author or authors and their educational and professional experience. Do they have a master's or a PhD on the subject? Have they discussed this topic before in other sources like articles or books? Are they connected to a reputable institution like a college or university? Many sources like articles, books, and websites will usually provide information on contacting the author. This allows you to pose them questions about the content of their work, especially if something is unclear or controversial. Another factor affecting a source's credibility is the citations provided by the author. These are the resources that were used in their research. Remember, no citations essentially mean that this source should be original research. Finally, look at the publisher to see their own credentials. Do they tend to publish more scholarly works or popular items meant for the general public? Next, you want to figure out if the resource is biased or not. Does it present material in an objective manner showing all sides of an argument? If it does not, you need to determine exactly what side the argument is taking. A bias is not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're trying to argue a particular point. It is simply important to recognize if there is a bias so that the material can be presented in an accurate manner within your research. You will be able to determine a source's audience based on the reading level and coverage of the source. For example, if a work is targeted for an academic audience, it will use terminology and present data meant for those with background knowledge on the particular subject. You will also want to see if your topic is covered adequately, providing you with enough information for your research. Accuracy refers to how the author conducted their research. Do they indicate how they used resources? If they conducted a study, do they explain the steps for collecting data? For original research, such as scientific experiments, do they clearly explain their methods? Also, does the information contradict other resources on the same topic? You want to be scrupulous when evaluating a source that is putting forth ideas that appear to go against an established norm, or most other works on the topic. Currency may or may not be a factor when evaluating resources. It will be very important when doing research on time-sensitive subjects, such as scientific or medical topics. In these cases, you want to be sure that the data is relatively recent and that you have the most updated or revised edition of an item. Finally, relevance is a major factor in selecting a source. You want to make sure that any resource that you use for research is directly impacting your paper or project. Do not simply mention a source because it will make your bibliography longer. Also, the work should provide enough information appropriate to the length of your research. For example, for a 5-page paper, you may only need to use one chapter of a book instead of the entire work. If you find a resource that works perfectly with your given topic, make sure you look at its references. These may refer you to other sources that also may work well with your subject.